You are a scientist and you've been working on a project, a very particular project that is so secretive for whatever government that you're working for on. Again, we're going to assume that it's government contracted and things like this, that the technology you're working on underground, literally underground, in these military bases is so unique in its, I guess we could call it capabilities or phenomenon, that there's no other way, in your opinion, relative to your scientific knowledge, this technology or phenomenon could be initiated or induced. Okay, so you're enjoying a nice cup of coffee on the weekend, what have you. And again, doesn't matter what country you're in. And then all of a sudden you hear there's a shortage on some of this stuff. There's a shortage on some of that stuff. And then, of course, there's the discussion of, again, as there always has been, to be fair, nuclear war, right? This concept of nuclear war. Now, a lot of people have said, again, very strongly, there are three types of WMDs these days. We have weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass disruption, which is a whole other topic we haven't dived into yet, and then weapons of mass discussion. Now, here's the thing. You as a scientist have NDAs and you're aware of these capabilities, but it's nothing you can speak of publicly. But you're having a coffee one day at a local coffee shop on the surface. Again, you live your quote unquote normal social life, non-working life on the surface, and you're familiar about a lot of different things you cannot speak on. And all of a sudden, there's a threat of a nuke being dropped. Although you say to yourself, hold on a second, there's certain elements to what the media is saying about this particular nuke or weapon that matches what I'm working on underground during the week, during my 9 to 5. Now, you're going to see why I give this example. But before we do that, I do want to say we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Generation Z, where a lot more of this type of discussion and content occurs. In addition to, we just recently started a newsletter for the Gen Z channel, davez.substack.com, in an attempt to merge the military intelligence, the, I guess you could say, esoteric, scientific, and the unexplained paranormal high strangeness elements together in a way that may synchronistically, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, work. And we'll be actually looking at some of that shortly. Now, with that said, as I promised to the members, and I know the public looked at some of you looked at the recent announcement video publicly, where I said I would be getting back to these types of episodes. Now, please forgive me. I know, for example, I don't have the usual microphone and things like this. I am traveling for much grander purposes pertaining to the show, but I did want to come back to these types of episodes, and I have some episodes coming up in which I think you folks will really enjoy. So, SADM, using frequency inductions to simulate weapons of mass discussion. So first and foremost, what is SADM? Let's break this down very simply, very strongly. And again, we're going to notice as well that there's a lot of similarities to a lot of things that we thought were not connected, okay? SADM, Special Atomic Demolition Munition. This is according to wikipedia.org, also known as the XM129 and XM159 atomic demolition charges, and the B-54 bomb was a nuclear man-portable atomic demolition munition ADM system fielded by the US military from the 1960s to 1980s, but never used in combat. Okay, again, I'm not going to be sarcastic and saying never used in combat. We never know. We don't know. Now, here's what's interesting, however. Take a look at some of the images as we scroll through them. You could basically carry them on a knapsack, if you will, right? Now, you may be saying, Dave, why are you looking at this? We have far more advanced technologies than this. Yes, but again, it's not what it is. It's how it looks with respect to the narrative that's being, for example, propagated to the masses. So why do I bring this up? I'll tell you very simply. Okay, this is the part where I am not saying this is what is happening, excuse me, but it is a possibility. Again, this speaks to the concept of open and free thinking. So if I am some, for example, individual or group of individuals, and I'm really not trying to be sarcastic here, attempting to, for example, I don't know, shape a particular narrative, let's say, what would I do? What would I do? From the inside of the government, I would feed to the media something like this. And then we'll get back to the SADMs in a moment, I promise. Something like this. We're going to purchase, tell the New York Times that this is this is ABC 8 News, right? WRIC.com/Hill. US purchases $290 million of drugs for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies. Right. Again, it's not about what it is, it's how it looks. Did they really spend the money? I'm not saying they did or didn't. The point in this particular objective from the perspective of those attempting to shape a narrative, if you will, is to get the story out to the media. Okay, you then call up another publication and you say, hey, it's quite possible Russia's going to use nuclear weapons. In this case, again, Russia, I'm not speaking to in specific Russia, but again, this is the context in which we're observing. This is Reuters.com, last updated 3 days ago from the time I'm recording this. So this is nothing per se, again, tinfoil hatting, if you will. With that said, here's what I then do. I then call up, say, in this case, CNN, Fox, Fox29.com, Russian nuclear submarine armed with, quote, doomsday weapon disappears from Arctic Harbor, according to the report, end quote. This doomsday weapon does not really have to be anything, in my humble opinion, advanced. Just the word doomsday gives, again, it's not what it is, it's how it looks. It conveys to the masses that there must be something advanced about it because it's, it's a doomsday weapon. Not exactly. Well, for example, would the SAMD or the SADM, excuse me, be considered a doomsday weapon? Well, for example, doomsday weapons we imagine would be advanced and what have you. Well, they may not be so advanced, but they may not have been used before. Well, again, according to the official narrative, these SADMs were never used. Now, you may be saying, Dave, why are you bringing all of this up? Well, okay, I'm going to lay it out for you folks very simply before we move on to the next sets of this presentation, which is that, again, all I got to do, if I am, again, I'm not saying any one nation, actor, you name it, but like any other, attributable group who basically wants to take credit for actions like this, or if you are one wanting to shape a narrative, I'm going to leave it at that, in either direction or multiple directions, I would take some of these SADMs, let's say, place, again, this is purely hypothetical, place one in New York City, place one in Chicago, place one in California, place one over here, one over there, a little bit all over the place, right? While the placements are being made, you're calling up the media as well to feed the stories. And of course, the media is not going to question you. You're calling from within the government. Why would they question, right? Okay, now, here's the next incredible thing about all of this as well. If you then take a look at this right over here, davez.substack.com, the concept of weapons of mass discussion. Again, we see here, what do I mean? This is part of the Substack, the article, that the newsletter we just started that I announced at the beginning of this episode. What do I mean by weapons of mass discussion? Well, take the below image, for instance, right? This UFO. Here's what we say here. Whether you believe in it or not, you as a person personally deemed the value as to whether it was real or not. So we can then correlate this back to the media outlets because, again, they're reputable and things like this. And so you say to yourself, my gosh, it must be true because they have our best interests at heart. And of course, the U.S. just purchased, so imagine in this case here in the United States, $290 million, almost $300 million of drugs for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies. Right? But here's the thing. Let's go back to this. Say, for example, you have this image or this particular picture, if you will, and say, again, this UFO, you send it to some of your friends, but not others. You have created a neural pathway without even realizing it to become, quote unquote, hackable, not in the way you may think. I'll explain in a moment what I mean by that. By choosing to send the picture to some and not to others. By definition, you've already created a node of intent that can be followed and surveilled non-digitally. How? Well, again, we see right over here, nexusnewsfeed.com, not exactly a mainstream media website. U.S. intelligence accidentally leaks documents on electromagnetic mind control weapons. Okay? Now, this is what gets extremely interesting in my humble opinion. I say this because we look over here and we see, again, you could see different parts of the human body that could be affected to simulate moods, psychoelectronic or psychotronic weapon effects and things like this. We see it could be induced via the phone. We see it could be induced via the satellite, the truck, you name it, right? What's interesting about all of this is imagine these SADMs are placed all over. They're placed all over the particular country, and then certain frequencies are induced to not only give the effects of a nuclear fallout, but to give a panic effect in a mental sense so people begin to discuss it. This is when the consciousness element comes in. If people begin to discuss it at a social level, it doesn't matter if it's physically real or fake, at a social level, it becomes real. You guys see what I'm saying here? I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm not saying this is what is happening. I'm simply saying this is a possibility from a military intelligence perspective. Again, this speaks to the overall idea that if we go back to the article here, the newsletter, the first one that I wrote, again, what we've just covered without potentially noticing is the ability for you, including myself, as a sovereign individual, to be hacked non-electronically via sharing an image like that UFO image in the article above here, right? Or discussing, oh my gosh, did you hear about, for in this case, the SADM nuclear bombs? When really you were, for lack of a better term, hacked in a different way, a non-public way. For example, if these documents were fake, why were they not denounced by the United States government or any division or agency within them? Again, take a look. Certain parts of the body, sudden violent itching inside eyelids, forced manipulation of airways, controlled forced speech, widely racing heart without cause. Again, forced precision manipulation of the hands, intense general pain, microwave hearing. I'm sure there's some things one can do in that particular regard that would create some issues, for example. And again, if this is not official knowledge in official databases, no one's going to point to this as the source. And I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it is a possibility to be. When in reality, the SADMs, the nukes, if you will, they never went off. They never did. There was a frequency induction that simulated that. Again, I'm not saying that's what will happen or what is happening. I'm saying it is a possibility from a military intelligence perspective for this to be the case. For those out there, read between the lines when you hear this, please. For those that understand what I'm trying to say here. Thank you so very much. We got a lot of great content lined up for both the public and the members. I promise to get back to these type of videos, and we'll catch you all very, very soon. Cheers.